Florence Schaffner sat. She asked to see it. He opened his briefcase just all of that. With a parachute he packed himself. With $200,000 strapped to his body. With no survival gear that anyone has ever been able to confirm. Whatever calculations he made on that plane, he made them and he jumped anyway. The crew landed in Reno at 10:15 p.m. They taxied to a stop. Federal agents were already on the tarmac. They boarded immediately. The rear of the plane was empty. The seat in row 18 was empty. The briefcase he had carried on, empty. The bomb, if there ever was one, was gone with him. The agents swept the aircraft. They found 2 of the 4 parachutes still on board. He had taken 2. He had left 2 behind. The investigation was already 2 hours old, and they had nothing but a seat and a name that wasn't real. The FBI named the investigation Norjack, Northwest Hijacking. It would become one of the longest-running active cases in Bureau history. Agents fanned out across southwest Washington. They searched the forests. They dragged rivers. They interviewed hundreds of people. They chased leads that went nowhere. They built profiles. They rebuilt profiles. The working assumption in the early days was that Cooper was dead. The jump, the weather, the terrain, the odds against survival were steep. But without a body, the case could not close. And without the money, neither could the questions. The first serious suspect was Richard McCoy Jr. Less than 5 months after Cooper's jump, McCoy hijacked a United Airlines flight. The parallels were striking. He demanded $500,000 and parachutes. He jumped from the aircraft over Utah. He was caught within days. Agents found the money in his home. He was convicted and sentenced to 45 years. Then he escaped from prison. Then he was killed in a shootout with FBI agents in Virginia. Some investigators believed McCoy and Cooper were the same man. The FBI formally disagreed. McCoy's physical description didn't match Florence Schaffner's account closely enough. The case moved on. Decades passed. The suspects accumulated. L.D. Cooper was named by his own niece in the 2000s. She said he had military parachute training. She said he had spoken about the hijacking with a familiarity that went beyond casual interest. She said he had once shown her a receipt, one she believed was connected to the ransom. The FBI investigated. They could not confirm or rule him out conclusively. He died before a definitive answer could be reached. That pattern, a name surfacing, an investigation opening, a death intervening, would repeat itself more than once over the next 50 years. Robert Rackstraw was one of the more persistent suspects. Career criminal, ex-Army paratrooper, convicted forger, thief, and con man. He had the skills. He had the background. He had a documented history of deception sophisticated enough to fool people who should have known better. In 2016, a private team of codebreakers claimed they had found hidden messages in the typed notes Cooper sent during the hijacking. They said the messages identified Rackstraw by name. The FBI reviewed the findings. They remained unconvinced. Rackstraw himself denied everything until his death in 2019. The Bureau closed no door, but opened no charges. February 1980. A family is camping near the Columbia River, northeast of Vancouver, Washington. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram is digging in the riverbank. His fingers hit something. He pulls it out. 3 small bundles of paper, rotted and falling apart. His father looks closer. They are $20 bills. His father takes down the serial numbers. He calls the FBI. The numbers match. This is Cooper's money. $5,800 of it, out of $200,000, sitting in a riverbank 9 years after the jump. The discovery doesn't solve anything. It makes everything harder to explain. The money raised more questions than it answered. The Columbia River ran roughly 20 miles from the primary drop zone. If Cooper had drowned and his body had traveled downstream, the bills might have separated and washed ashore. But the bundles were found together, not scattered the way floating debris typically moves. Some analysts believed the money had been buried and then slowly eroded to the surface over years. Others believed Cooper had survived, spent the bulk of the cash, and the remainder had been lost or discarded near the river. The FBI ran tests. The geology of the site was inconsistent with the known flood patterns of the Columbia. The money's location has never been fully explained. By the mid-1980s, the FBI had reviewed over 1,000 suspects. Not one had been charged. Not one had been definitively eliminated either. The case had consumed an extraordinary amount of investigative resources. Agents who worked Norjack spoke about it the way soldiers speak about a war that didn't end cleanly. There was no resolution. There was no body. There was no confession. There was only a name that wasn't real, a seat that was empty, and a rear staircase that had opened once, over dark forest, over cold rain, and never offered an explanation for what it released into the night. In 2016, the FBI made an announcement. After 45 years, they were suspending active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case. Not closing it, suspending it. The language was deliberate. They said investigative resources needed to be redirected toward cases where victims still needed justice. Cooper's victims, if he had any, were an airline, a government, and a legacy of unanswered questions. No one had been physically harmed. No one had been killed. The Bureau walked away from the longest-running unsolved case in American aviation history with the same thing they started with. A name that wasn't real. The composite sketch of Dan Cooper is one of the most reproduced images in American true crime history. Plain face, dark hair, mid-40s by most estimates, average height, average build. The sketch could be 10,000 different men that, investigators would later observe, may have been entirely intentional. He chose a name no one could trace. He wore clothes that suggested a businessman, forgettable, standard. He behaved with a restraint that made witnesses second-guess their own memories. The man who hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305 was, by design, impossible to remember clearly. The cultural aftermath of D.B. Cooper is unlike anything produced by a conventional crime story. Within weeks of the hijacking, he was a folk hero. Bumper stickers, t-shirts, songs. By the late 1970s, there were novels, films, a TV movie. The town of Ariel, Washington, near the primary drop zone, began hosting an annual D.B. Cooper celebration. People dressed as him. People toasted him. The FBI was actively hunting him and the public was actively celebrating him. That tension never fully resolved. It just became part of the American story. Why did America root for him? That question matters more than it might seem. 1971 was not a gentle year. The Vietnam War was grinding into its second decade. The Pentagon Papers had just been published. Public trust in government was fracturing in real time. Into that climate walked a man who outwitted an airline, outwitted federal law enforcement, and disappeared without hurting a single person. He didn't rob a family. He didn't threaten a community. He took money from a corporation and a government apparatus and walked into a storm. To millions of Americans, that read less like a crime and more like a fantasy they didn't know they were having. Survival experts have weighed in on the jump for decades. The consensus is not kind to the theory that Cooper walked away. The wind blast at that airspeed, close to 200 miles per hour, would have been physically punishing on exit. The temperature at that altitude in late November over the Pacific Northwest would have been well below freezing. He jumped at night, with no visibility, over a landscape of dense Douglas fir forest, steep ridges, and rivers running fast with winter runoff. He had no helmet, no jumpsuit. He was wearing loafers. Even experienced military paratroopers with full gear and daylight have died in terrain like that. And yet, no body. 50 years of searches and no remains have ever been confirmed as Dan Cooper. Hunters, hikers, loggers, forestry workers. None of them ever found anything. In terrain where animal carcasses decompose quickly and human remains have been found years after disappearances. Nothing. That absence is either the most powerful evidence that Cooper died in a place too remote to locate, or it is evidence of something else. A man who landed, who walked out, who became someone else entirely. The forest kept his secret either way. Consider what survival would have required. He would have needed to land without breaking both legs on the forest canopy. He would have needed to navigate out of one of the most remote stretches of the Pacific Northwest in darkness, in winter, in street clothes. He would have needed to cross at least one river, possibly the Lewis River or a tributary of the Columbia, while carrying a bag of wet cash. He would have needed to reach a road, find transportation, and disappear into civilian life before any checkpoint could be established. All of that, in one night, in a storm. The odds were close to zero. But close to zero is not zero. The rear staircase of the Boeing 727. That detail has never left the story. It was a design feature, a ventral air stair that could be opened in flight. After the Cooper hijacking, the FAA mandated a device that would prevent the staircase from being opened while airborne. It became known informally as the Cooper vane. One man, one night, one jump, and the architecture of commercial aviation changed in response. The aircraft manufacturers had to build a new rule into the machine because of what he did. Whatever else D.B. Cooper was, he left a mark on the physical design of the industry he robbed. That is not nothing. The case is suspended, not closed. That distinction has lived in the public imagination for nearly 50 years. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, in a riverbank under a tree at the bottom of a gorge, there may still be answers waiting to be found. Or there may be nothing. Just a man who made a decision at 10,000 feet, stepped into the dark, and ceased to exist in any form the world could verify. He is either dead in a forest that never gave him up, or he sat down somewhere, counted his money, and spent the rest of his life as someone the world had no name for. Either way, the rear staircase closed behind him, and the plane flew on without him. I keep thinking about that. The plane just kept flying. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. This channel is built for the stories that don't let go. New episodes drop regularly and everyone is built from the ground up. Hit the like button if you made it this far. It helps more people find this content. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think happened to D.B. Cooper. Did he survive? Is he out there? Or did the forest take him? I want to read every single one of those responses. Subscribe, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next one.